You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Let's dive into a brand new episode.
Before we get started on this episode, here's a not-so-short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster nor the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed here. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 25 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. Steve isn't, nor does he offer any legal advice. For any legal advice, you must speak to a lawyer. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search for author Steve Worsley. You can also take Steve's mold education courses, such as Mold 101 and the Mycotoxin Prevention Kit, by going to cnccontractorservices.com. Again, check out his mold education courses at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Lacey Lee is the owner of Mold Dog of Virginia, where she works alongside her unique business partner, her certified mold detection dog, Rudy. Using the extraordinary power of his nose, Rudy is trained to detect mold, both active and inactive, helping identify mold that is hidden behind walls, ceilings, under floors, and in places the human eye cannot see. Together, they inspect homes and businesses, providing a non-invasive way to locate mold and help property owners understand what may be affecting their indoor environment. Lacey's work is deeply personal. Mold Dog of Virginia was born out of her own battle with toxic mold exposure and her difficult journey of finding answers and solutions. Having been in her client's shoes, Lacey brings both empathy and determination to every inspection, committed to helping others uncover the truth about mold in their homes and workplaces. Now, let's get to the episode. Hello, you're listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with myself, Steve Worsley. I have been promising everybody that I would bring on guests, and I finally did it a couple weeks ago, but I found a really great guest. Her name's Lacey Lee of Mold Dog of Virginia. She has a little pup, Rudy, that I just got to meet before we started this, and she's been doing mold inspections for several years. She'll tell her story, but she also has her own story with her own mold issues. So on behalf of everybody that's listening, we welcome you, Lacey, and thank you for coming on the Toxic Mold Podcast. So why don't you introduce yourself and how you got into all of this?
Hey, Steve. Gosh, it's so great being here. Listen, you don't get into the mold dog business unless you've been through hell and you've battled that beast of mold, which you don't get into mold without it being a battle. But really, my story started with Lyme disease, just like a lot of people. I was told I had chronic Lyme disease in the beginning of 2015. And by 2016, I had declined to a point where my mom was living with me. I had become essentially, as I like to say, allergic to life. I was reactive to everything, to every noise, touch, fumes, chemicals, smells, could tolerate maybe like 5 foods. And my cognition, I had nothing there. I couldn't hold a conversation. I couldn't understand what people were saying to me. I had the debilitating fatigue. And like many people that are battling Lyme, you're trying every treatment. I was no different. Every treatment, I was just getting worse and worse. I was having bad reactions to treatments. And this went on for literally 5 years. And I was just declining. Not a single doctor, not a single one mentioned mold. And
Wow.
I didn't even know to think of mold. it wasn't in my vocabulary. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, other than the obvious, like you see it, there it is. And I entered a treatment program that I'm actually still into today. They focus a lot on mold because if you're being in mold, you can't get to the treatment. So all my education, my eyes were open. I learned that I was living in toxic mold. Now, what I didn't know, because this was just how uneducated I was in the mold world, about a week after I was diagnosed with Lyme, I had a massive water event in my condo. And water event is putting it mildly. Something happened to the outside of the building that the apartment above me, it broke the sprinkler system. And I wasn't home, but my condo turned into just a natural rainforest. When I came home, water was coming from every square inch of the ceiling. So the one thing I did know was like, well, everything in here is lost. I had to get rid of everything. I didn't live there for months and months and months as they tore it all, put it back together again. But I tell you, Steve, this was how uneducated I was. I wasn't following up with like what they were actually doing. I didn't know what procedures they were doing in my home. All I know is they just put it back together again as I wanted it. And I didn't think anything of it. I just was living. So as I was getting worse and worse with Lyme, never did I even think that this event could have been an issue. I mean, there's no way that it wasn't in the bones of this place at this point. So I ended up moving, selling my place because I had remediators come in. I made all the mistakes, Steve. I did like the number one mistake. I hired a remediation company that also did testing. I don't know what they did. Again, I wasn't following up with these people. I was that sick and I just wasn't thinking clearly that I was making all the mistakes. I would have these companies come in to say, you're in a clean environment. And I knew I wasn't. My lab work was telling me I wasn't. ERMIs were off the chart. Looking at the ERMI, it was like all the toxic ones were just off the chart. But yet companies would come in and say everything was fine. The frustration, and I don't know, have you had mold exposure before? Have you been exposed?
No, I'm
No,
not.
okay.
It's interesting. People ask me that all the time, and I'm like, well, I don't have a mold story. I'm just
Well,
in the
what it
business.
does, it's one of those things that unfortunately no one can understand what it does to you until you've experienced it. And it is crazy making. It literally makes you feel crazy because that's what it's doing to your brain. And it's isolating because sure, someone can have empathy for you for what you're going through, but there's no understanding of what it's doing. When people are sick living in mold, they're typically staying in that environment because they're sick. So it's this vicious cycle. I always say it's like a fish is in water, it doesn't know it's in water. You don't know how bad it is until you leave the environment or the environment improves. When you're not seeing it, it's kind of hard to think that this environment is making me sick because there isn't any visible signs. It's not, jumping out at you. But when I moved out, it was pretty evident. I mean, it wasn't within days I felt better, but it was very quickly that, wow, I was really bad off. And I just had no idea. Like I said, you don't feel well. Well, we don't know. As humans, we're pretty darn good at normalizing an abnormal way of living and being, and we just normalize it. It's how we survive. And until you get out of it, you don't really realize how bad it is. So the frustrations of it all, of just trying to deal with mold, but it was also a learning curve for me. I just didn't know. Even though this treatment program was guiding me, my cognition and ability to understand things was so bad. I was reading things wrong. I was just making all the mistakes.
Right. Well, I think in your eyes, though, to defend you, you were hiring professionals on the remediation side. So you thought you were doing the right thing. I mean, you weren't
Yeah.
intentionally ignoring it. You just made
No,
assumptions,
I
which
mean,
we do.
and you're right. At the time, I'm thinking I'm doing the best I can, but I also, when you're being exposed to mold, you're in fight or flight, and it's a threat. Like you are under threat. So like I was making decisions without thinking about it. It was like I would just hire someone, or I was just doing things so quickly because I just felt under siege. Basically, you're just in this
Right.
battle that it's like I knew it was in the house. I just didn't know. I would love to go back to my place now, and with the eyes that I have now, like I don't, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I know you go into a building and I am looking all around, I'm assessing where I am, but I just didn't have that. I didn't have that brain then. I didn't know to
Right.
look. If it wasn't screaming at me, I didn't know. And my place didn't have any obvious sign.
Right. To kind of just tap into that a little bit, was it just like a remediation that was done and then they were finished, or did they have to keep coming back to do more work?
Well, no, because they said it was clear. And
Oh, wow.
the remediators they pour something in one, like they took apart a ceiling, but it's like, I didn't even think to question, like, what was it that you found? I don't even know. Like, I was so out of it. I don't even know what they did or didn't do. I
Right.
know that I went and stayed in a hotel for a handful of days while they did whatever work they cleaned, but then they said everything was fine. So I just trusted everything was fine. And, but it's like, I look back and I'm like, I don't even know what they did, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Well, and
I shouldn't have been making the decisions. I should have had like an advocate helping me make these decisions. I just wasn't
right.
making proper decisions.
Right. So for our listeners, just out of curiosity, because I get this question all the time, how long does it take after you've removed yourself from the moldy home or building? For how long did it? I know it doesn't happen in days, but was it months, 7, 8 months, 1 month?
Well, no, I mean, I would say it was, and everybody is different, as far as what, but it was a lift of my cognition. I would say it was within weeks,
Oh, okay.
that I felt, yeah, no, it was pretty evident that I was in now a safe environment. Like it was a night and day experience.
Right. Okay. Because
Yeah.
I think that's what our listeners like to hear. I
Oh,
tell
yeah.
them from my perspective, I'm like, it's not like you're going to notice it a day or two later. But as I said, I've never been through it. So you sell the
Well, some
place.
people feel it pretty immediate. Like people could like go away for the weekend or go away for a week just on vacation and go to a better
Yeah.
environment and feel better.
Yeah, and that's typically what I always ask my clients. I'm like, do you travel a lot? Do you notice you feel better? From the medical side, obviously, we don't get down those rabbit holes, but sometimes the symptoms can be delayed. And, maybe when the client comes back from vacation, it might take them a week or two to start going downhill again. And I say this all the time in the podcast, but psychologically, you're on vacation. So I think
Yeah.
automatically you're going to feel better. But on the other hand, you should be able to notice. And when it's somebody like you in your situation, you don't know what you don't know. So it's kind of crazy. And as you go into your story and explain more, our listeners are going to love what you have to say about like you got away from the mold in your home, but explain then how the process went going down the mold dog road.
So I moved into an apartment, which was clean, not a problem. But at the time, I owned a fitness studio. And so I was also having issues at my fitness studio. And again, companies would come in and say, everything's fine. I'm like, no, I know it's not. And so when I was doing all the stuff at my condo, I didn't know about a mold dog. I didn't even know that existed. So I was just working with the humans that I had available. But by the time I needed my fitness studio address, I knew about a mold dog. And Bill Whitstein, who is the guy that trained Rudy, he is basically the pioneer of mold dog. He's the one that created this entire industry 30 years ago. So he used to do an East Coast trip, and I caught him on one of his trips. And his dog Sarge went right to the areas that had the mold. And this is what makes it so challenging. One of the million things of dealing with mold makes it challenging is when human companies come in, I fully believe there's no ill intent. It's just we're limited as humans. We can't see
Hmm.
what's going on behind walls. When something looks pristine, there's no reason, and there's no moisture problems, the thermal is checking out. There's no reason for anyone to think that there's something going on behind that wall. Well, the dog went right to it. And it was in a bathroom under behind a sink, and there was no water damage, no indication. Bill said, you need to take this drywall out. And as soon as I did, it was a block of it was a wood that was coated with mold. On the other side of that wall was a shower. And so it was from the actual shower. Another area that was something that I didn't know at the time, but I had two dressing rooms and Sarge alerted to the carpet. I would never have thought that the carpet, it looked fine to me. I didn't, there's been no water event on the carpet. But what I didn't know is carpet has a life expectancy. So after, probably a good 7 years, it's time to replace it. What I didn't think about was carpet is a sponge. So it's literally
Hmm.
soaking up every aspect of everything. It's not just mold, it's human cells, it's
Yeah.
bacteria, it's
Pet
you name
dander,
it.
all sorts of stuff. Yep.
Right. Right. And then there was one other place of a double door that had water damage that I just didn't know to look at the way Bill showed me. But these were areas that I would never have known. I would never have
Right.
known if the dog didn't point it out.
And so for our listeners, he's based out of Florida.
He is.
And
Uh-huh.
when we talked before, I was telling you that my wife thinks that I should get a mold dog, and I'm not so sure I want to go down that road. But that's the hard part about mold dogs. Like you said, I get asked all the time. And that's what I love about having you on the podcast, because the questions I get, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, you don't know, like you said, what you can't know. But most of my clients are like, there's no mold dogs around. So, I know it's getting better and better, but explain to our listeners, and we didn't touch on this one when we talked before, but how important is it as far as how a dog is trained for mold? Can you kind of explain that so they understand it?
It's very important. I mean, I know that there's other people out there training dogs outside of Bill. I can only vouch for Bill and any dog that is trained by Bill because of his methods. Now, I didn't do the actual training, so I don't know Bill's method to his madness on what he's doing, but I know that the science and the research Bill did to even create this industry was extensive, and it continues. But what sets Bill's training apart from others is he's constantly available for anything that we need. A lot of, I think, the other mold dogs, you get the dog trained and then you have to go fend for yourself. When a dog is trained, it's a dog. You have to, it's not just like a plug and play. Like it knows how to work. There's a relationship between the dog and the handler. So the handler is just as important as the dog. But Bill is constantly available for any needs that you have. If you're going through inspections and I don't know, your instincts are the dog isn't doing right, or maybe you just have a question on things. But also what's important is Bill does quarterly training. So every 3 months, he checks in and we do a FaceTime training so he can see the dog at work to make sure that he is still a working dog, that he's still doing the right stuff, and that Bill can vouch for this dog. I think that's very important. I tell people all the time when they're wanting to hire, contact Bill and see what his
Right.
thoughts are on this dog, because it's a big deal that I am entering someone's house to help them find mold, specifically because I just know the stress all of this is taken, not only emotional and physical stress, but the financial stress. And so I want people to be confident that they're hiring the right person. If it's not us, I want them to get the person that they feel most confident with.
Right.
But the training is paramount, but also the handler is just as important. In my
Yep.
opinion, you want that handler to have gone through a mold event themselves.
Right. The reason we actually cross paths, we obviously won't share any personal information, but I had a client. It's kind of similar to what you went through. They sold their place, moved into a newer home. Well, our testing was just showing some red flags. So then they bring you in and your dog just alerted to all these other places. And when they were talking to me about it, they're like, what do you know about mold dogs? And I said, to be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot. I said, but I know it's important how they get trained and, how old they are, how long they've been doing it. Just to backtrack a little bit, I think for our listeners, explain to them how you got your mold dog and how old he was and the process you went through so that our
Sure.
listeners understand that.
So I spoke to Bill dozens and dozens of times to make sure that, because I was going to get a dog specifically for this. I had a dog. So I have two dogs, but the dog I had, the thought of sending my dog down to Florida for 3 months and then me be dogless, I just couldn't do. So I knew I needed to get a second dog. But Bill was very firm that when you're looking for a dog, this dog needs, and this is the criteria the dog needs to have in order for the dog to be trained, because not every dog can be trained to be a mold dog. So the dog, first of all, has to be okay with people, places, and things. It needs to be motivated by food, not treats, but food, which I thought all dogs were motivated by
Yeah,
food,
I
but
was just going
apparently
to
not.
ask you that.
No, apparently not. Luckily, Rudy's motivated by food. I feel like he could eat all day long. And you don't want to get a dog that has a smush nose, so it needs to have a good sniffer. And the dog, you want it to have confidence. You can't have a timid dog. Like I said, you're going into these strangers' homes. It's going to be around a bunch of things, so people, places, and things. And I was just fortunate that when I went to look for a dog, and I went to this place that had a few options, there was other dogs in the room, and Rudy came right to me as if I was the only thing in this room. Nothing else
Wow.
mattered. And it was just that I think everyone has kind of this feeling when they get their dog, and it was just a knowing. I got the same breed as the dog I already have, and I knew that they were very smart and that they used their nose. Rudy's a Cavalier King Charles, and Bill had never trained a Cavalier, so he wasn't quite sure if they would be good or not. But I was so confident with the dog I had. She was trained to find gluten for me for celiac disease, so I just knew the capability. And Rudy has been tremendous, and Bill was, you know, like couldn't believe that a Cavalier was as good as they are.
Right. And
Yeah.
so we talked about this when we talked last time, but it's a certain age. Just explain to our listeners, like, you don't want to train a dog that's 8 or 9 years old. Just kind of walk us through at what age can they train, and then at what age do they somewhat retire the dog?
Well, Bill takes the dog at 10 months. I was fortunate that he took Rudy at 9 months. He was actually able to meet Rudy and was able to kind of say, yeah, thumbs up. He's good to go. So Bill says 10 months to a few years. And the only reason he would certainly train a dog that was 5 or 6, but you want longevity with the dog.
Right.
So that's why he has this time frame, but he wants the dog to be at least 10 months, 10 to a year, I would say. And as far as retirement, I'm not sure what that number is, to be quite honest. Yeah, I think it's different for every dog. And I would hope that the owner would kind of just know when it's quitting time.
Okay.
Because it's
So,
all about the dog's health. At the end of the day, everything we
right.
do is like Rudy is highly protected. And I can say that for my other mold dog friends is the dog is protected.
Yeah, so I'm sure all the listeners are probably wondering the same thing I'm going to ask you. One of the most common questions I get is, how does the mold and mycotoxins not make the dog sick? Just kind of walk our listeners through that, because, of course, and I'm sure they already know that at this point, you love dogs. But for those that think that we're hurting the dogs, just explain that to our listeners.
Probably the most common question, and it's an important one. So dogs are designed differently than humans. They were actually designed to be outside in nature, to be where all the mold is, to have their nose in the dirt, where all the mold is. They have a different immune system than us. They have a different filtration system than we do. And when a dog is doing scent work, they're actually breathing differently. They are taking these short breaths and they're breathing out of the side of their nostrils. So they're not taking these big inhalations like us humans do when we're smelling something. It's just a completely different mechanism. And Bill, for the 30 years he's been training dogs, hasn't had a single dog sick.
Really?
And yeah. And now, listen, that doesn't mean dogs are not immune to being sick in mold. If a dog is living in mold in a bad environment, then it can certainly be sick. It can have respiratory issues, skin issues. So they're not immune to it, but the amount of time that Rudy is spending and the dogs are spending in it isn't enough to get them sick.
Okay. Yep. So, like I said, we talked about that before because that's always been my biggest question. How long did Bill train Rudy for? Was it a year, 6 months?
He was there for 3 months,
Okay.
and they do extensive training. It's an all day event of training, thousands of hours.
And so then I'm assuming when you're done with when Rudy was done, you go pick up the dog. You had already connected with Bill, so that's a little bit different. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's not like you send your dog off and then they just send it back to you and then you start
No,
doing mold inspections.
no, no, no,
um,
no. Yeah, no, there's a whole process. So I went down to Florida, stayed there for a bit to be trained on how to be a handler, how to actually work with Rudy, how to inspect homes. It's a whole extra training for me. And then
exactly.
when I come home, there's an acclimation period of the dog. You don't just go straight into doing inspections. It's, continue doing the training. There's extra training that we do. There's something called a wheel, which is like a carousel that has mold on it, and he can spin it around. He has to find it. And then we do hides. We'll hide it, and he has to find it. So it's just mimicking inspections that we do in homes. And then for me, like I said, at the time I had a fitness studio. So then I just did like all my clients' houses to just get experience and just to keep doing it. And we still do training to this day. I mean, he's getting training by doing inspections. And the training that Bill did for the dog, it's actually ingrained in the dog. So we don't technically have to keep training to calibrate his nose, but we do so we can hone in on making them the best mold dog that we can be. So it's constantly improving on our skill, our communication, our bond, and when I'm walking him through a house, I can tell when he's smelling, if he gets distracted and sees something, I'll circle around. So there's a communication going on between the two of us. That's very
Right.
important.
Right. Okay. So another question, and our listeners know this. I'm a certified mold inspector. You're not going to hurt my feelings with anything that you say. But like you said, there's only so much we can see and do. Would you say, and I feel this way, even though I'm an inspector, probably one of the first on-site visits that our listeners should have, it's probably well worth hiring a mold dog, wouldn't you say, right off the bat?
Absolutely. Well, and here's the thing, if people are feeling like there's a mold issue in their home, they just don't know where it is, then yes, bring in a mold dog. But I also believe that we also need inspectors, that it's not just a mold dog. You need as many eyes as you can on the home to paint the picture, because you're able to do things that we can't do and vice versa. So I actually think that I'm always looking like, what's the gold standard? What is the best thing? And that would be to bring in an IEP, bring in a mold inspector as well as a mold dog. And you're going to get the best of both.
Right. Yeah. And I completely agree. It's,
Yeah, absolutely.
our listeners know this, and my wife talks about this all the time. You want to build your team, and you can't just have the mold dog, because obviously you need an IEP that's going to write the scope of work and do all of that. But it brings me to my next question. That's probably the second most common question I get. What's the range then for Rudy to be able to detect the mold? Like, let's say it's in the ceiling and he's, clear down at the floor. Can he detect that in the ceiling?
Absolutely. So mold spores are falling to the ground. They are naturally going down to the ground at his level. So yes, he is smelling it from above. Oftentimes the issue hasn't stayed up there. It has traveled down a wall. It has come down closer. But yeah, he'll still be able to detect things up above.
Okay. So
We
then,
actually just
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we actually just did a house where we started on the first level, and because there's connecting of dots as you go through a house that can paint a picture, and like between walls and floors. And he alerted to some random places downstairs, which didn't really make much sense, but right above, they had some shower issues. And he was smelling what was going on with the shower above.
Gotcha. What about the opposite of that? Let's say that there's a mold issue in a crawl space. Can he still detect that?
Oh gosh, yes. And all the time does he. So, couple things. He will alert to like floor vents on the first floor a lot. So that can pinpoint that there's a crawl space issue. But we don't go in a crawl space, but Rudy just needs to smell the air to the opening of the crawl space, and he can tell us that there's an issue. But a lot of times there's evidence from the first floor that there's an issue in the crawl space.
Okay. So walk our listeners through, like, because they've heard me talk about how I do inspections, but kind of walk them through from the beginning of your inspection to the end. Like, where do you start? Like, what's the process like?
So I first go in without Rudy. And I start on the outside of the house. I'm doing a visual inspection around the outside of the house. I'm looking at gutters. I'm looking at the foundation. I'm checking the grading. Is there, water pooling where it shouldn't? I'm checking just as anything seem that it shouldn't be. And I'm doing this for many reasons. Obviously, I'm going to let the homeowner know what I'm seeing. But when we go into the house, that's going to connect a dot, and that's going to make more sense as to what Rudy's trying to tell us.
Right.
And I'm also paying a little bit more mind to that section of the house with Rudy, because when Rudy, and I can only speak for Rudy and my experience with how Rudy operates, but when Rudy smells mold, he sits. And a dog can't tell us the exact location of where that mold is. But when he sits, he's saying, there's a problem in this area. So if I know that I saw something on the outside of the house, then I'm going to be able to connect that dot of what makes the most sense for me to direct the homeowner on their next steps. So
Right.
I do the outside inspection, and then I go in the house and I talk with the homeowner. We're walking through the house. What I'm doing is I'm doing a visual inspection inside as well. I'm looking at the windows. Do I see cracking, bubbling around? I'm looking up at the ceiling. Anything that seems that there's something compromised. I'm asking questions. How old is the carpet? How old is the house? How long have you guys lived here? Obviously, I'm asking them any history of water damage. What has happened? What's been remediated? What hasn't? And then if the homeowner is sick, because the kids typically can't answer this question, because a lot of times it's the kids that are sick. But if the homeowner is sick, I will ask, do your spidey senses go off anywhere in the house? And I will tell you,
Right.
Steve, 100% of the time they are correct. So I
Yeah.
always ask that, because that's not that I don't give the whole house a complete 100% with our inspection, but having areas that are of concern, I'm just making sure we're focusing on those areas. And so when Rudy is sitting, alerting, and telling us there's an issue, then I put blue painter's tape down where he's sat. So once he sits, like I said, he's saying there's a problem in this area, and there's a wingspan. There could be a couple feet to where the actual issue is. So I then assess that area, because my biggest goal is to make sure I'm providing the homeowner, because you don't want to just say, well, it's somewhere in this area. Like,
Yeah,
okay, let's try to
exactly.
narrow down what is it that Rudy's trying to tell us. Now, I will ask Rudy to show me, and he will point into the direction of where the issue is. He can point down if it's a carpet, it's a vent, it's a wall. But just because he points at a wall doesn't mean that that's where the root cause is. It could be coming from the ceiling, and he is smelling it at the wall. So I'm looking at it. I'm doing moisture meter readings, thermal imaging. I'm checking where's the water source, what's the history of this area. I'm seeing what could be compromised, so I can guide the homeowners on what their next steps are going to be, because it doesn't end with a mold dog. There is a proctology exam that happens after us, and that is
Right.
to find the actual mold. But more importantly, we got to find the root cause. Why is it there in the first place? Which can be
Exactly.
very challenging. It can be very
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah. Well, it brings up something that for some reason, I just thought of this. Does the mold have to be like viable and active, or can it be in a dormant state?
It can be in dormant. So he's trained on active and inactive molds.
Do, does he signal to you? Like, do you know? Oh, it's okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
unfortunately, I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I don't know the level, the degree of issues. A dog's nose is very sensitive. So just because they're alerting doesn't mean it's a catastrophic situation. What the dog is saying is, I smell microbial activity. If it's not
Right.
addressed, it has the potential of getting worse over time. And a lot of times a dog is catching it before it does get to a catastrophic situation.
Wow. Wow. I don't know why I thought of that, but that was an interesting thing I thought of. As far
Yeah.
as interacting around other dogs or pets, can you explain to our listeners, like, do the homeowners have to lock their dogs up, or how does that work?
Well, for Rudy, yes. I don't know how other mold dogs are, but Rudy wants to play with every single living human. I mean, not human, animal. It could be a bird, a squirrel. He wants to play. So work mode gets turned off if he sees an animal. So I already am in contact. The homeowners already know this before we get there, that I need animals out of the house during inspection.
Oh, okay. What about
Yeah.
so with children and obviously
Kids are
humans are
fine.
fine.
Kids are fine. Yeah, that's fine. I just ask that if there are kids, and kids get very excited, that when we're in the room that they're in, if they can just be quiet and still, so Rudy doesn't get distracted. But it's
Wow.
never been a problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so tell our listeners, like, how long have you been actively doing inspections with Rudy?
So Rudy and I have been doing this almost a year and a half. Yeah, and we've been nonstop since we started.
And does he like, is there a time frame? I know you said you do your visual inspection first and then you go get Rudy and let him do his thing. Is there like a max, like only 2 hours, 4 hours, or is he
I
pretty
don't put a
good?
time frame on it. Yeah, I don't put a time frame on it, but it averages a couple hours. Certainly square footage of home makes a difference, but really it matters on Rudy's findings and how much we talk about it. So if
Gotcha.
there's not a lot of alerts and there's not much to talk about, then that's going to be on the lower end. But I don't
Gotcha.
have a limit. It takes the time it takes for
Okay.
us to do the thorough work.
Okay. Because I guess that's what I was just curious if he gets tired after, I don't know, I get tired and I'm
No.
human.
I mean, in the
Oh,
beginning, when he was first starting, I would have to take breaks. Like, I do one floor, just give him a few minutes, and we go up. But now, I mean, he could do it all day long. He's a busybody. If he's
okay.
not working, he's doing something.
So do you bring your other dog? You mentioned you have another dog that
Uh-huh.
for gluten. Do you bring that dog with you?
Sometimes I do, but a lot of times my mom will keep her for me while we're on the
Gotcha.
road and doing things. Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me to obviously a question our listeners are probably wondering. Do you travel? And if you do, how far?
Yes, we travel. And honestly, we go everywhere. We'll go wherever anyone wants us. But
Okay.
if someone wants us to come from, and it's a long travel, I would actually try to find them a mold dog closer to them, only because it's going to save them money. So I'm very passionate on making sure people aren't spending money they don't need to spend and they're not taking steps they don't need to take. So I certainly will travel wherever anyone wants us. That's not a problem. But we have a very tight community of the handlers that Bill trained. So I would reach out to my other mold dog friends and see who was closest to see who can help them out. Because
Okay.
there's no competition in my eyes. I want these people to get the help that they need, and I'm going to trust my my other mold doggers that were trained under Bill.
Okay, so I don't expect you to name every place or the handler's name, but just tell our listeners like where you know of other mold dogs
Oh
throughout the
gosh,
U.S.
they're everywhere. California, Wisconsin, Colorado, New York. They're everywhere, and they're Bill's constantly training. So there's more mold dogs now than there's ever been. But I encourage people to do the due diligence, see who that mold dog was trained by, and get as much information on the handler. Talk to them, get references, to just make sure that you're making the right decision.
Okay. Once again, I only go off of what my clients say, but I hear it quite often. They're like, we can't find a mold dog. And I'm like, well, I know of one in Colorado. And I
Yeah.
believe, we're not far from Jackson Hole, but I believe there's a mold dog up there, but they live somewhere in the South. And so I was
Okay.
just curious to kind of hear, if there's a lot of them out there. So the next question I have, and this is just curiosity for me, but I'm sure our listeners want to know this too. Do you like, when you have Rudy show up, is it common for you to have like an IEP or a remediation contractor there too, or no?
I haven't, but I'm not opposed to it. That wouldn't bother me at all. I mean,
Oh,
I've
okay.
had one client, like they had their contractor there, which I actually encourage.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
that actually is helpful for me.
Okay. And just kind of
Yeah.
explain to our listeners, I can explain it, but it'd probably sound better coming from you, why it is beneficial to have their contractor there.
Well, they're understanding the building science differently. They're able to see, like I had went to a client's house and Rudy had alerted to some windows and she had her guy look and he was able to get eyes on the outside and they weren't sealed at all. And I wouldn't have been able to tell her that because
Oh, okay.
just the position he put himself in to look around the window,
Right.
I wasn't able to do that. So it's giving a little bit more insight of to like, okay, what could be compromised? And he understands windows more than I do and more than the homeowner did.
Exactly. Okay. So another question, I have tons of questions, so I
No, this
apologize.
is great.
Um,
No, I
so
love it.
for our listeners, they should know what PRV is, which is post remediation verification. Let me phrase it this way. Is it in the standards or like your scope of work for Rudy to do PRV inspections once the remediation's been completed?
That's certainly an option. I let people know that we'll do a discounted price just to come
Okay.
and check that area.
Okay.
So yeah, we certainly have done that, and they can certainly use us if they want to not spend as much money. They can do some other methods to just see if the environment is cleaner.
Yeah, because I think, in my opinion, I would trust your dog more than I would trust some testing. And
Right.
I was
Right.
just curious if that's something that, they say, no, you shouldn't do that, or yeah, that's
No,
great.
no, yeah,
Okay.
we do that all the time. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So,
And also, I
it,
want to say about if any listener is wanting to know, is there a mold dog near them, that they can reach out to me and I will gladly let them know what's near them.
yeah, because before we wrap up, we'll let our listeners know how they can get in contact with you. I'll put it in the podcast description. I think you're brave enough. You want me to put your phone number in it. So,
Yeah, you can go to my website or because my phone number's on the website anyway. So it's
right. Yeah.
either way is fine for me.
As far as kind of backtracking a little bit, is Rudy able to distinguish? Because I know this isn't relevant to me, and I can explain why. But most of my clients always ask, "Can he find toxic mold?" Well, to me, mold's mold, and if it's there, we just want to get rid of it. Is he able to distinguish between toxigenic mold species and?
No, no, that's it. That's the only drawback. Oh, I say the only drawback. That is a drawback. I mean, mold dog has limitations just like every other testing has a limitation. So no, I don't
Yeah.
know what's toxic, the amount of mold, the species, I don't know. But I do offer if someone wants me to do some tape sampling, I've partnered with Hayes Microbial, so I can test if they
Okay.
do want me to I do that lots of times in crawl spaces, even though I can say this is mold, They just want to have some confirmation of what it
Right.
is.
Yeah,
But yeah.
and our listeners have heard Steve's the owner of Hayes, and
Hmm.
I believe it is Steve. And they offer mycotoxin testing,
Yeah.
tape lifts, air sampling. I'm pretty sure they do asbestos.
Yeah.
Pretty well rounded. And it's funny you bring that up because that was another thing I was going to ask you is if you offer any testing. So you will, if you see mold, and let's just say it's right here on the wall, and Rudy obviously alerted to it, you could visibly see it. You'll just do a tape lift and send it off.
Correct. Yep. I give
Okay.
them that option if they want me to do that or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to kind of for our listeners, when I said I'll explain why it doesn't matter to me if it's toxic or not, any mold growth inside of a home is not acceptable. And the way we do remediation, we're not going to treat, let's just say cladosporium or penicillium, which both of those can have toxic species. We treat it the same as we do Stachybotrys. And like I said, the reason I asked that is I don't know how you could or would train a dog to be able to distinguish because there's hundreds of them. So,
And he's
but
trained on all molds. I mean, there isn't a mold that he's not able to identify. It's just if I could just get in his little brain and know what it is that he's smelling, he probably knows. He probably
yeah,
knows exactly what it is. He just can't tell
yeah.
me.
Going back to the whole treat thing, I'm just a little intrigued by that too. So when he hits somewhere, you don't reward him with a treat. Is that correct?
Yeah, when he gets a treat, which is just his food, he gets a kibble when he alerts to mold.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because
Yeah.
I have had clients say to me, well, if they're getting a treat every time they hit somewhere, they're going to hit everywhere. And I'm like, well, not really. I mean, the handler knows what the dog's.
Right. And I mean, Rudy is just as happy with a good boy than a treat. So as we're going through a house, he's not alerting to mold. He's getting good boys. And if you could see his tail is just
Oh,
go, go, go. So he's
okay.
getting rewarded whether he's finding it or not.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm sure our listeners want to know this. I don't think it would be possible, but have you ever done a mold inspection with Rudy and not found anything?
I have, but let me tell
Oh,
you how. So, like I was telling you earlier, and I did my clients' home, my fitness clients, these weren't people that were contacting me to say, hey, we got an issue. We just don't know where it is, or my lab is saying I'm being exposed and I don't know if my home is it or not. But I did my clients, and there was many of them that did not have any issue, but they also weren't thinking they did either. But when we do homes of people that are hiring us, there's a whole spectrum to Rudy alerting to one place to Rudy to alerting to way more than that. And for the most part, he's going to find something because these people, they're sick or their lab work is saying that it's in there.
yeah, that makes sense now. Like when you were first training him, it was they weren't reaching out to you, so
Right.
they didn't have
Right.
any
I was just,
reason. Okay. And
right.
how often do your clients have you ever is it common to have a client that has had zero mold testing or mycotoxin testing reach out?
Yeah. Actually, I've had people that they're just symptomatic, that they're not feeling
Okay.
themselves. And whether it was, I don't know, a Facebook group that they're in that said, hey, you should probably get your home checked for mold. And then after that, then they get, go to a doctor and get further testing. But it's very few, to be quite honest. It's typically the opposite. Like their labs are saying they're being exposed and they don't know if it's in their house, but they have to rule that out or confirm it first. They
Right.
don't go anywhere else because I always ask, well, do you go to an office? Because it doesn't, you could go to just one place twice a week. And if that place is moldy, that can show up in your lab. So it's not something you have to be going to every single day to be
Right.
exposed. But you always got to rule out your house because that's where you are the majority of the time.
Yeah, I was just curious because I guess what I'm wondering is do a majority of your clients have they had several different types of testing or professionals in there that said nothing was wrong, kind of like your place you
Sure.
sold?
Yes. Yes. A great majority of them. Now there's a whole spectrum. So I get people that are like the mold dog is their first shot at the rodeo. Like they haven't done anything but that. And I'm like, gosh, you just saved yourself so much time and
Oh yeah,
energy and money. But then I got
exactly.
people that were in the exact same boat as me, that they've had countless people come in, say that there isn't a problem, and they know that there is. So I get majority of the people that were in the boat that I was in.
Yeah, and I think that's why it kind of brings me back to for our listeners, most of the time, once they come to you, your clients, my clients come to me, for the most part, they've spent thousands already.
Yes.
And that's what I was wondering, like, because in my opinion, and of course it's not my money, so they're easy for me to say they should spend it. But in my opinion, I would hire a mold dog first, if not just to say, yeah, your house is fine. But if you think you're being exposed to mold and you had moisture intrusion events, and
Right.
before you spend the money on all the different testing methods, I would hire a mold dog if it were me. I mean,
Well, and I'm obviously a little biased, but I
yeah,
also just know from my experience, the reason why I would do it first is it's pinpointing areas in the home that are of concern. Because then you are then still going to want to get other mold professionals in to then hone in on that area of the house and find where is it the root cause. So if you start with us, you're narrowing down a lot of headache and
yeah,
wondering.
yeah.
Because
And
like I said earlier, you get these humans that come in and they don't have a reason to check an area further because there's no indication of an issue.
yeah. Well, and I don't know about Virginia, but there's only a handful of states that even regulate our industry.
Oh,
Like,
it's so bad. Yeah. Virginia does not have any regulations.
and I'm not taking shots. I agree with what you said. I don't think the professionals were intentionally telling you everything was
No.
fine. But on the other hand, when there's no regulations like we have out here, you just don't really know who you're getting. And obviously, I do inspections. I'm a certified inspector and I'm a certified remediation contractor. I keep those two separated. But part of the problem is most of the people don't really understand what they're looking for, or they're like you. I haven't gone through it myself. I just get to talk to people that have gone through it. So I guess
Yeah,
my point is it's you just don't really know who you're getting in your home. But I think, and our listeners know this is my opinion. I would hire a mold dog first because even if it's less than $1,500 or 2,000, most of my clients have already spent thousands for an IEP that found nothing.
right.
So
And if you think then you're going to get the mold dog, spend that money, but then you're still going to need more investigation work after us, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, and like you said, like there's situations I've been in where my clients have had 3 or 4 different inspectors or testing methods done. We get there, we have to do the more invasive stuff. So that's why I think having Rudy come in first for me. If you were closer to Wyoming, I would be telling people all the time, like, yeah, call and get Rudy and Lacey in here first, because then we know where to focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, before we start wrapping everything up, I just want our listeners to understand that you're more than happy to help them, even if they're out here in California or Wyoming, or that you'll fly
Absolutely.
out here too if they want to pay you enough
Absolutely.
for it.
Well,
But,
Wyoming is a top of my bucket list to get out and see. I've never been. I just think it's got to be this gorgeous sight no matter where you are.
well, that's the funny part is you've got to be
Yeah.
over on the western side where we're at.
Okay.
Most people that drive through Wyoming are used to I-80, which is clear at the southern edge of Wyoming, and it's beautiful when you get by Laramie and through there. But yeah, Wyoming's kind of it's funny that how many people believe that all of Wyoming's beautiful. It's not.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, I'll make sure when I go that I'm going to the areas you say
yeah.
to go to.
Yeah, come to the
Okay.
Jackson, Star Valley, Tetons,
Okay.
Yellowstone. All of that's the beautiful part. The rest is kind of high plains. It's kind of ugly. But
Okay.
anyhow, on behalf of all of our listeners, Lacey, we want to thank you. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. My listeners know I've been promising. I keep promising I'll bring on guests, and I don't. But I'm trying to change that. So we appreciate you coming on. For our listeners, I will put her contact information in the description. It'll have her email address and her phone number and her website. But is there anything else you'd like to say? And then we'll wrap up.
I guess what I want to end with is whatever someone is going through. It could be, you have chronic sinus infections, chronic headache, fatigue. You're just not feeling yourself. You get this sense something is off in the house. You need to at least rule out that mold is not a contributing factor. That was the one thing that when I was in a decline that baffled me that no one mentioned mold, and I could have saved myself a lot of heartache, financial heartache as well if I would have just checked my environment. But people, you think of like the new year and wanting to get healthy, people, go to the gym, they make better food decisions. And the missing ingredient is our environment that we live and work in. People are not realizing that is a crucial aspect to our health. So if it's
I
not
guess
bothering you now, it's going to eventually.
I would ask you just your opinion on this. Why is it that you think mold just never gets brought up? It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've always wondered that, and I don't know. It's this scary word that no one wants to kind of address. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. No, I was just curious
It
because,
doesn't scare me, but it's a very real thing that no one wants to talk about. And I don't know if it's like, I don't know if it's people think that maybe aren't cleaning, like there's a cleanliness issue, or they're not good homeowners, or they've made a mistake. And I don't know what it, I don't know. I don't
yeah,
know
yeah,
what it is.
yeah. It's interesting
It's a
because,
scary topic.
yeah, I have obviously a lot of differing opinions with it. I think in our medical field, they're not trained in it. I don't know why. I always hear, well, mold's been around forever. And I'm like, yeah, but not the way we build our homes. Like this is
No.
new. All the stuff, the toxic stuff we're putting in our
Yeah.
homes.
And we
But
can't live without mold. I mean, we can't have 100% mold free. It doesn't exist, but there's a level in which it's going to impact your health. You can live in a low
exactly.
mold environment and be completely fine. And that's my hope for everyone, is to be living in a low mold environment, because like I said earlier, we normalize an abnormal way of being, and you're just feeling a little sluggish. That might be that your environment is making you that way, that it's
Yeah.
not stress at work or other things that we can so easily
Yeah.
point to.
Yeah, I think we as humans kind of brush it off like that's just part of getting old or,
Sure.
perimenopause or menopause
Yep.
or whatever you want to
100%.
call it. It's
And
easier
there's
for
so
us to,
many variables to think about. There's so many aspects. It's never just one thing, but you want to at least get your environment checked out to see, is it a contributing factor? It may not be the reason that you're going through something,
yeah,
but it's not going to allow you to get better. So you could have as serious as cancer to a chronic illness to, like I said, chronic sinus infections. If you're in a moldy environment, you will not get better. Your immune system won't let you.
yeah, yep. And,
Yeah.
our listeners know this, but most of my clients have Lyme and
Yes.
there's something about mold and Lyme. Dr. Fox talks about it all the time, but
Chicken
they
or the
don't
egg.
work. Yeah, they don't work well together. So,
Yeah.
like I said, we really appreciate your time, Lacey. For all you listeners, it's worth hiring a mold dog. And like I said, I'll give all the information out. Do you have anything else?
No, this has just been wonderful, Steve. I just appreciate all the work that you do. You and your wife,
Okay.
both of you guys.
All right. Well, on behalf of all of us, we thank you. And for all our listeners, you have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If mold in your home has you up at night, wondering if your house is making you sick, it is time for a plan. With a mold consult, in other words, the mold environment assessment and evaluation plan from CNC Contractor Services, you will get a 90-minute strategy call with Steve Worsley, who will review your home environment, answer your toughest questions, and create personalized mold recommendations and next steps just for you. Don't let mold concerns take over. Take control. Visit cnccontractorservices.com to schedule your mold consult today so you can breathe easier in your home tomorrow.